But basically, you've come to the webinar Decoding SEO Success, which is kind of our SEO research webinar series. And what we do is we break down the SEO strategy of popular software companies so you can deploy them yourself. Because I've made the experience that writing, a long, dry, abstract SEO guide can be fun, but it's even more fun looking under the hood of famous brands and seeing what made them successful. And so this is the approach we're taking today. We are live analyzing a very well-known HR tech startup. And the idea is for you to learn about what are they doing right, where are they succeeding, and what are some opportunities for them. As we're going through the webinar, feel free to pop comments into the chat. Feel free to answer your questions. We're reading the chat, responding to the chat, and love to hear from you. All right. Whom are you listening today? My name is Viola. I run a digital marketing agency called Flow SEO, where we specialize on SEO for SaaS companies, especially in HR and e-learning. And today I have with me Rebecca. I'm very excited to have you join the webinar today.
Hi, great to be here. Thanks for the introduction. My name's Rebecca, and I've been working in digital advertising and SEO for over 10 years now, and I'm one of the SEO consultants at Flow SEO.
And yeah, so super excited for this one. So what we'll do today is we always try to pick examples that have like an interesting angle, an interesting strategy that they do. And so today we're going to talk about the website structure that Personio has built for their product pages, resource library, SEO content, and blog. And we will especially talk about the success secrets of their very well-ranking HR lexicon. And if you've been looking up anything in HR in the last 2 years, whether it's English or German, they're basically constantly coming up. And so we want to show how they did it and how they did it so quickly. If you have not heard about Personio yet, they're a company founded in 2015. And I think they already got a lot of press attention anyways, but especially late last year when they closed another round of funding, which makes them one, if not the most successful European startup right now. And yeah, I basically came across them just from Googling, and then more and more showing up, and I dug into them. And I think what's really interesting is that they mainly target European SMEs, small and medium-sized companies, which is interesting because this is where SEO becomes really fun, because you usually want a large amount of traffic, you want a very good funnel, you want a very good lead nurturing, and so I'm very excited to see how they're doing this. All right, I'm still letting some people in. There we go. All right. Number one thing that I want to talk about is Personio's website structure. And I think this is an interesting one because if you are new to SEO, you might hear people talk about links, about keywords, about page titles, about internal links, and all of these are obviously tasks and activities that are part of SEO, but for me, they're the very end of a long decision-making process. Like this is where we're implementing when we're fine-tuning things. But the strategy and what we're going after and how we're going to accomplish that happens before that. And so I want to mainly talk about the strategy, and I want to talk about the website structure, because that is at the core of SEO success. Yes, you can probably squeeze out more of a page if you're optimizing the headline 1 or the page title, but you're really providing a rising tide for all of your other SEO activities if you set up your SEO website structure right from the get-go. And so this is where we want to start as a framework. And you've heard me talk about this before, is the Google algorithm is obviously not human, and so it doesn't understand language in the same way we do. It understands language as a mathematical model, and it tries to extrapolate, which results give the best answer to a search query. And so for the mathematical mind that Google is, the more structured we can be, the better our indexability, our relevance, and our authority in the eyes of Google. And typically speaking, that means if we're wanting to rank for the keyword banana, we want to make sure we have that one and best page about bananas on our website, that Google knows this is the best answer to the search query. This is what I want to be pushing into the top positions. And so why am I saying that? I'm saying that because this is keyword mapping. So the process of marrying our keyword targets with pages and thus creating a good site structure is something that Personio has done really well. And I want to start with the keyword set that we call transactional keywords, bottom of the funnel keywords. So these are your high intent searches. These are people that, they know they have too much paperwork in their onboarding process. They know that hiring new people leads into a huge workload, and someone might have given them a tip that software can help. Someone might have recommended them a specific software already. And so they're actively in the pursuit of either researching a solution or purchasing a solution. And these are usually quite competitive keywords, obviously, but again, having the right structure, having the right type of page to meet that search intent is your best chance of actually winning for these competitive terms. And so if we come back quickly to this idea of fruits, vegetable, and meat, as your main structure for the website, I want to first jump into the fruit part of the website, which is where all the transactional keywords live. And so Personio created a very neat structure in the sense that they have /product, where they have an overview of all their features and the things that they can do. And then they've broken down into transactional keywords that are mapped to landing pages from there. And so we can see that, for example, online absence management software, they have a page for that. Controlling user access rights is not the best example, to be honest, but here, like cloud-based recruiting and sourcing software, applicant tracking software, approval process software, you can see that for each of these terms, each of these search intent, each of these different needs, they have a designated landing page optimized for that, which makes Google happy. And it also makes sense because you're meeting people where they're at when they're doing their research. And actually, I spent the entire day today talking with people about their product pages, solution pages, and use case pages. And I'm not saying that every single one of your product, solution, or use case pages always needs to be SEO focused. But if you do provide a very clean structure and there's the opportunity to optimize these pages for SEO, that's really the way to go. And the good news is that when you look at the search results for these types of keywords, it's usually a mix of like listicles, your Capterra, your G2, but typically Google likes to mix up the search results with a few landing pages as well. And so if you have a strong overall domain, you might actually stand a chance of ranking for them. But to be honest, this is where it gets hard. Personio winning page 1 for a lot of keywords, for a lot of these terms, they're more page 2, page 3, and they obviously need some more links and some more efforts to make it to the top position. But yeah, I really love the keyword mapping. I really love how it's cleanly clustered in that one silo. And I really like that they have the short, super focused URLs. And I like a very clean kind of like landing page template for all of these terms. But let's talk about the fun part. Like, actually, I think I never properly talked about this. I wanted to show you this little chart. I've not really explained this at all. It's like, what is really going on? It's like, Personio has been around since 2015. But you can see the SEO traffic only really picked up in 2020. So that orange chart that you're looking at is a chart from Ahrefs that shows the number of keywords ranking for that domain. And so you can see that in 2020, they were ranking for a few keywords, and now they rank for almost 75,000. And even more interesting is that chart here at the bottom, which is their top page 1 rankings. And so it's been a very short time in which they got a huge amount of rankings and a huge amount of SEO wins. And they have that in the UK, in the United States, then also India and Philippines, but also Germany. They really have a lot of keywords ranking. And so one thing they did is set up their product pages really well. And the second thing that they did is starting to produce content and SEO content really well at scale. And what I mean by that is when I say SEO content at scale is how much content are these guys really writing, right? So you might be thinking about your editorial calendar and you're posting 1 blog post a week, 2 blog posts a week. And I love it. Actually, I have that kind of as a minimum criteria. If you want to do SEO, you really got to post twice a week. But sometimes people shy away from maybe posting 20 articles a week or 40 articles a week. Firstly, I mean, it's a lot of work producing that, but the second concern is you also don't want to flood your blog with SEO content, and it drowns your feature updates, it drowns your press releases. And so what Personio has done really well is not putting all that content on their blog, but they basically started what they call the HR lexicon. And this is a part of the website. It is 205 pages strong, and that in the English, ranking pages makes up for almost half of their ranking pages live on that HR lexicon. And in their top 20 SEO pages, 17 of those are in the HR lexicon. And the beautiful thing about this is each entry or each page is a super long form SEO guide. And then they do have corresponding questions and long tail keywords that live on the blog. But really the meat of their content production that they pumped out in 2020 lives on this HR lexicon. And I'm wondering, do I dare to unshare my screen and pull it up? But we also have a screenshot, I think, coming up. So I'm always a bit scared, like unsharing my screen. All right, Rebecca, I'll let you take over here.
Yeah, so excuse me. Yeah, we're really focusing on with Personio of how they've been able to scale their SEO content. And whenever, looking at this keyword ranking graph again, really seeing their rankings pick up in late 2020, I'm always curious of, what is the evolution of the website? So I pulled a screenshot from Internet Archives here of what their website looked like in January 2020. At this time, they only had the blog as their resource pages, as far as resources go, linked in the top level menu. By the spring of 2020, we saw a new web design. By the fall, the blog was removed from the top level menu. It was changed to the resources, and the dropdown started to include downloads and that HR lexicon. And that's where we really started to see rankings begin to take off. And we're going to really dive into the success and how that glossary HR lexicon has really been successful for them. I just wanted to highlight this specifically of, if you want to scale your SEO content, your website needs to be ready for it. So marketing teams often are involved in new website designs, website launches, but really making sure, I think an important takeaway of involving your SEO team, your content team, do they have the resources, the templates and tools to scale their content? And when Personio, I think, did a really strong job in January 2020 of creating those templates, the new website to really be able to scale their content. So looking at the next slide, this is the screenshot that Viola was mentioning of what the Personio HR lexicon looks like. So 200 pages here, really well organized, and focusing on these really high level top of funnel keywords within the HR space. Going to the next slide, here's just an example, or here's a list of some of those really big wins that they're having with their HR lexicon. So attrition rate of 12,000 search volume is ranking in the first position from their HR lexicon. This content area of the site where they've really been able to scale SEO content is what really was driving that keyword ranking graph that we saw starting in late January 2020. And jumping once more to the next slide, we're really seeing a takeoff of more companies, especially in the software space, creating glossaries. And there's quite a few SEO benefits to this. So Viola did mention, it's an opportunity to really scale up your SEO content without flooding your blog. So if your blog is really focused on more product marketing pieces, company updates, thought leadership, and you don't want to have don't want to flood it with a lot of very SEO focused of what is attrition rate type of content, the glossary is a great opportunity to do that. That screenshot that we shared of the glossary homepage, it operates as a great pillar page. So Personio's is pretty minimalist, but I think it's great design, easy to navigate and find that topic that you want. And it provides great site, and having that as the pillar page is really improving the overall site structure and keyword mapping. So we can see exactly, hey, in the glossary, this piece of content is mapped to that keyword. So exit interview, attrition rate. And they're all just very highly relevant because every piece is SEO focused. So they're able to create these 200 plus pieces of content that are very focused on search, optimized for search. And lastly, one of the benefits is link targets. So Viola, I was going to let you chime in about how these do make such great link targets.
Right. One is, I mean, I assume that they have a pretty like good and well operating link team, running on this. I put a little comment on the bottom, which says there's 2,000 domains pointing to the lexicon pages, and the top 10 performing pages have an average of 33 referring domains. I know Google would love for us to put content on the internet and then magically people link to it. It typically does happen. When does it happen? When you're already in position 1. So I assume that Personio has a good, like link building team working on this. But the difference between getting someone to link to your transactional performance management landing page versus having someone link to a blog post about what is attrition rate, it is just easier to get people to link to guides, especially if they're long, detailed, and well designed. And so, yes, you still have the link effort, but I do think it's going to be a bit of an easier feat getting people to link to those pages.
Yeah, agreed. And looking forward, so, here are some of the benefits of glossaries, of these lexicons, but I think we're going to really dive in on how Personio did it right. And looking next of, one of the key items, I think, on the next slide is that it's much more than a dictionary. So it is still very difficult to rank short form content. So if your thought is this could be a quick win, throw up 200 definitions, that is not necessarily what we're recommending and not what we're seeing of how they've had success. This screenshot's pulled from Surfer SEO. So for the term attrition rate, where Personio's HR lexicon page is ranking #1, we actually see it as the longest piece of content of the top 5. So it's over 2,000 words long. So it answers the question, provides a definition of what is attrition rate, what is attrition, but it elaborates much more beyond that. And
we've been talking about this yesterday about the language, what's the difference between a glossary, a dictionary, and a lexicon? But really the way you get a look at these pages is more like a Wikipedia. And I think this kind of like also fits with what Martin just asked in the comments. He asked us, like, what about duplicate content and copyright? There's only so many ways you can describe a concept. And so what I would say is that we are not looking for that perfect, smart, punchy 1-sentence answer to what is attrition rate. That might be very hard, to spin a unique angle on. We're really looking for long form educational guide. And of course it's explanatory, but there's always that option to have examples, tell stories, etc., and write something that is different from your competitors. And I think it is a massive beast writing so long guides, but I don't think that typically if you have your content team and that you would be running in so many duplicate content issues.
And we see this trend across other glossaries too. So in the next slide, we have an example from Active Campaign of their glossary. We want to show that. So their glossary is focused on your email marketing top of funnel terms. And then next, Revenue IO has built out their glossary inside sales glossary, so focused on a lot of sales terms. And when we put Revenue IO in Ahrefs as well, really saw that their top pages are also long form content. So it is not these simple definitions, but they're just very structured SEO pieces, long form content, providing a definition, providing an answer of what is B2B sales, but then elaborating further and having some additional long tail keyword variations that are ranking within the article too. And with this, so here's just an example of, larger image of one of Personio's HR lexicon posts. So you can see that it is, has a table of contents, it's long form, really engaging design, and much more than just a simple dictionary. And where this is performing really well is they are receiving a lot of featured snippets. So this is very, very SEO focused pieces. Frequently featured snippets provide a definition. So you'll see, a lot of these articles, a lot of these pages follow the same structure of what is rate of, or what is attrition rate, and they are winning those featured snippets. And so this is, really great opportunity to continue to expand on the traffic of having these really SEO focused pieces that can win featured snippets. This is something that we frequently do of trying to optimize for featured snippets, of looking at, where do you have keywords ranking in the top 5, top 10, where there is a featured snippet on the search results, and optimizing your content, updating your content to try to win that snippet. They have, in the next slide, I did want to touch too, they do add FAQ schema to their HR lexicon pages. So the screenshots just from the schema validator tool, and looking at it, they have a few of what is attrition rate. And so I think, besides just the content, of finding those technical opportunities to also really optimize, they're doing a great job of making sure that their lexicon pages have this extra context to search engines of what the page is about. And this isn't as much related to the content strategy itself, but something that I wanted to touch on that I thought Personio was doing really well. They have a really large library of downloadable content and gated content. And as we're looking at the site, they've really customized their call to actions and offers based on the article, so it's relevant for what the user is actually searching for. So this example of questions during an exit interview, very prominently, they have a free download for an exit interview template. We really saw this across their content of making sure that they are mapping their call to actions and offers to the content, bottom of funnel versus top of funnel. Someone who's searching for exit interviews isn't ready for a demo, isn't ready for a free trial, but you want to, we're all about scaling meaningful traffic that will ultimately grow your business. And so we want to capture that lead. And so seeing that they're doing, I think this is a great example of how well they're doing their call to actions to capture the leads from when they do get that user onto the site.
And I might jump in here, kind of like answering a question / providing context is Martin was asking, is the longer definition with a learn more link the opportunity of the strategy to get an extra visitor click and signals and higher engagement in Google? And so I quickly, if I can, wanted to show again, the user flow of these pages is really someone types in attrition rate, how to measure attrition rate, what is attrition rate, all this stuff. And they land here, right? They land right on that page, optimized for that keyword. And so that is the first thing that they're seeing. And then all the content is kind of there, right? And so they might see the definition featured snippet and then choose to jump on, but this is where they always land on this page first. And this glossary page, whilst I'm sure if someone is in personio.com, people probably sometimes navigate to the glossary and then dive in from there. I think the glossary first and foremost is visited by the crawlers And then most people end at one of these pages first, read the article. And then, as Rebecca has been saying, what they then do is they either dive deeper in the page, read more articles, or ideally they download this asset, and then they have good time on page, they have engagement with the page. But I think in a dream world, someone types the keyword, sees the nice search results, clicks on it, reads the article, downloads the asset, and then kind of like moves on from there. All right. Any other thoughts, comments, feedback from the audience? Feel free to pop it in the chat and we can dive deeper into this. I think this is really interesting because I know ActiveCampaign really launched their glossary or their dictionary also, I think 1.5 years ago. I think revenue.io is similar. And so I think it has to do with the fact that a lot of people want to come off their ad spend. A lot of people want to increase their organic traffic, but a lot of people don't know where to put SEO content at scale. And so I think that is really solving that issue quite effectively, because you just know this is exactly where it goes. You don't have to think about the template. You don't have to worry about, is it going to be too much or anything? You can really just pump them out. And I think that's kind of like showing the popularity. And then in terms of SEO, all your long form evergreen SEO guides live in that one neat hub that Google can really love. And so from there, I wanted to talk about some opportunities on the site, and then also, have a discussion with Rebecca about research centers and blogs, because I know we potentially have 2 different points of view on that. And so I'm excited to see what we can come up here. But basically, when we think about content production, content marketing, so people think, okay, there's your blogs, right? Now in the case of Personio, there's the lexicon pages. And then typically SaaS companies have what I will say is like sales enablement content. And what I mean by that is these are your webinar recordings, these are your case studies, your white papers. And so these are the things that you advertise on your lexicon pages or blog posts, or these are the people that you want people, when they navigate to the site, to come to. And so in the case of Personio, when you go to their resource center, they call that HR Knowledge Hub. People sometimes call that resource library or content library or resource library. It's all kind of like a similar idea. What happens is that when you go to that page, you can basically find all of their different content types. You find their white papers, you find their studies, and you find their blog posts and their lexicon pages. And so if you go and you say, okay, I want to see all the content about onboarding, you might be getting all the different content types. And whilst I think that their resource page, I dare to pull this up, I do think their resource page is actually really neat, actually really neat. However, Knowledge Hub, it is a very neat looking site. However, what I'm always curious about, or where my thought always go to, is, so here you can see you can choose by topic, and then you can choose by type, and then it's all the different type of content. They're all here, including your blog posts, etc. And so it's very neatly structured by topic: onboarding, offboarding, performance, which I like. But what I'm always curious about is more, let's say, the e-commerce conversion optimized like mindset, which if you go to Amazon and you type, coffee mug, the first cup that's going to come is the best-selling item, right? So the best-selling item is on the top. And so I'm always like, with the research center and sales enablement content, I'm always like, put your most downloaded or your asset on the top, or put your spring campaign on the top, so that people don't miss it. So if people don't want to make a decision, they find the best converting one, the most interesting one right at the top. And so it was so that was like a comment that I had, like, I think they have a very neat structure, but I was like, would we be potentially wanting to put the best converting one on the top? The other thing you can see here is these are the categories that they use on the Resource Hub: onboarding, performance and feedback, recruiting, remote and hybrid work, and strategic HR. However, these are the blogs, the categories that they use on the blog: talent acquisition, operational excellence, strategy, and inside Personio, which I can see how the blog categories are maybe sort of like parent topics of the other ones, or they're the abstract strategic ones. And then the resource centers are the practical, you know, what do we need to implement ones. But I'm always thinking is like, would it not make sense to agree on what are our 4 or 5 main content areas? What are the 4 or 5 main topics that we talk about on the website? And then match that on the resource library and on the blog. So people, you see the same language, they see the same filtering options, and they know what they're looking for. And so that's something that I would love to, you know, discuss with them and dive into their thinking behind that. And so the other question I wrote here is, where I'm very curious on Rebecca, on your opinion, is we've had different clients, and different clients have come to different solutions, right? Some people have come to the solution like Personio, where everything is kind of like in one. We have other clients where their sales enablement content is in a resource center and then their blog is completely separate, which, spoiler alert, I kind of love. But I want you to start kind of like thinking, how do you think about this? What do you consider? And, you know, what are the criteria with which you would make that decision?
Yeah. And I think the big pro for having your resource center, so like your downloadable content, white papers, you know, ebooks, guides, having that in its own area of the site that's easy to navigate to is great for conversions. So if you have a person on your site who is browsing, it's easy for them to find that content. But I am more in favor, you know, so that is one pro to it. But I think the other side is actually having all of your content within one resource center. So absolutely, you know, still be able to filter by content type so that if you do want to find a template, white paper, case study. But I think the pro to having resources and blog articles within the same area of your site is you can create better content hubs on the topic. So for Personio, we saw that the resource center and blog actually are using 2 different categories, but having just one main pillar page, one main content hub for category instead of having 2, one for downloadable content on onboarding and one on blog content on onboarding, having your entire content library in just one area, covering that within a category, I think is better, you know, site structure. But once again, we still want to be able to easily navigate to those more downloadable gated content.
Yeah, I love that, because I think you're speaking to something which is the blog often has the bad habit. People are getting over it now, but for a long time, the blog had the bad habit of being sorted by date, which kind of makes sense, right? You have like an interesting like press release, you want it on the top, but it's actually a very weird way for the user to find information that is relevant to them, right? So if they're in the search for understanding performance management or employee engagement, but that's not what you've published in the last 2 weeks, you know, they're not immediately finding it on the blog. And so in general, yeah, super in favor of thinking about your blog also as a content library, sorting it by categories more so than date, and also super in favor of, you know, that designated like pillars, silos, content areas, hubs, however you want to call that. And I give you that. I give you that. When you split it out between the resource center and the blog, you essentially have like 2, right? You have the resource center / resource center / employee engagement, and you have the blog category / employee engagement. You know, and the reason why I've never thought it's such a huge issue for SEO is because these category pages are usually pretty thin in content, not optimized, don't have a good word count. They're not really an SEO beast that I'm really worried about them competing for each other. But yeah, I agree to your point that it is cleaner if you have one resource center and one pillar page and not a bunch of like different ones. I think the main learning for them, I would say, is like, I would love for them to talk with them about their 7 categories. Which ones are really the 3 or 4 main ones? You know, how could that be restructured?
Mm-hmm.
So I think for the audience, like, what do you take from this? I think you take from this, it is the unsatisfying consultant answer, which is, it depends. It depends on how your blog is set up, how your resource center is set up. But one, you want to make sure that all of your content asset, whether it's blog or sales enablement, probably want them sorted by both topic and content type. And you really want to think about how that sorting and categorization is like easy for people to navigate so they can find the stuff that they're looking for. And a blog role by date is probably not that. Any final comments, concerns, any opinions in the audience, actually, if you disagree or agree with that, or if you know how you have your website set up, I would love to chat about this, because I think that's a few hills we were bound to die on with clients over that decision. All right. I'll see. No, wait. Oh, coming to my next point, which is exactly that, is I was kind of surprised that Personio doesn't have, they have one beautiful pillar page, which I love. I will show it quickly, which is when they announced the new funding last year, they also talked about that work, that they're a people workflow automation tool, which that kind of made me think about that word sales enablement, or words like drifts, conversational marketing, and just people coining their own language and trying to, you know, carve out their niche and claim a space. But they built that very beautiful page, people workflow automation, which that doesn't have a lot of search traffic today, but it seems to be the language that they want to own and introduce to the market. And they've done, I think this is a very sweet one. Definitely very creative, very playful, engaging design. Yeah, really nice page. And I think this one is, I don't think this is so much, this is not an SEO game in the sense that the search volume is not there yet, but I think it's their opportunity to generate demand, coin language, you know, create a category or carve out, you know, a niche in the space that is HR software. But yeah, I'd be curious for them to kind of like maybe put out a few pillar pages around their main content areas. After that is maybe a bit more sorted between the ones that they have today. And then I think, as my pet peeves, they could have like a really nice design as well. Whilst, for example, the HR lexicon page is a super strong hub, right? It's strong for internal linking, but design-wise, it's clean, but probably not the most exciting one. And I think there's probably the opportunity for some of those pages, like create like equally exciting pillar pages as that one. Sam says, coining new terms is the way to go. Agreed 100%. Yeah, I don't know, Sam, if you're also following a lot of like Pep Laya's content from Winter on messaging. And so, and I think he had a podcast recently talking about how that word sales enablement was invented. And I've heard a lot about Drift. Didn't want to be chatbot anymore, and they invented the conversational marketing. And I definitely think it allows you to steer the conversation. But I would say that is a thought leadership messaging branding game. It's not so much an SEO game. And typically what you want to do then, if you do like a thought leadership strategy like this, is you want to have that one page, you know, for your thought leadership term. But then you probably want to have other pages around the language that people use today, which is probably more HR automation or staff management automation or onboarding automation. So, and you want to use those keywords, which is what people know and what people are looking for. And then you want to use those pages to educate on your concept. And you're like, typically when you're thinking about HR automation, you know, this is how it's done, but the new way we introduce is this and that. And then you can also like leverage search for kind of like coining new language. But yeah, until you generated the demand and until you push with thought leadership and PR, right? Not that many people are going to be looking for these brand new terms. Let's quickly talk about their blog after all of this. They do run a blog and they actually post on it a lot. And so what can we learn from this? I think they probably put up the HR lexicon, you know, as an SEO initiative. You know, it's like it's designated like silo on the website, and it was an opportunity to build that out quickly. But of course, it's not that they put up these 200 pages and then they never touch their SEO again and they're never writing content for SEO again. They do write content for SEO on the blog on a regular basis, which of course you don't want to run into keyword cannibalization. So if you have, the lexicon entry attrition rate, you don't want to use the exact same keyword for your blog post as well. And so your blog post is typically keywords that you have not used in the lexicon, or it's long tail variations or questions like, what do we have here? Calendar invite etiquette, not the best example, but it's more like questions. I know they had a post on questions to ask people when you think that they're going to be leaving, or signs that someone is going to be leaving. And so it's more these like long tail variations that you would put on the blog. And that probably would get out of hand if you try to cram them also into the guide on the HR lexicon page. But what was my point is kind of like the blog concept. The blog for them is really also the house of their thought leadership content and their company announcement. And so you can see that the keywords that the blog is ranking for are a little bit, let's say, like random. And so like one thing to consider is, either merging, the evergreen SEO focused blog content more into the resource library, or potentially like having the news and company updates in a designated different section. I think that is something to think about. And the other thing that I found funny is like, some of these blog posts are probably older and or uploaded by different people, but they actually do such an amazing job at like perfect URLs, clean URLs, short, optimized on the product pages, on the HR lexicon, that the blog, someone didn't get the memo about URL structure. And I think it has to do with a different team writing probably the press releases and blog posts and the SEO team. But that would just be my using SEO and URL, best practices also on your news, your press releases, your thought leadership content would be my recommendation. And if it's for nothing else, then also the links look better on social media when you share them, when they're kind of like short and snappy, than if they're super long form. Right, I think we've been running through this presentation today. Rebecca, is there anything on your mind that you feel like we didn't have a chance to talk about that you wanted to bring up?
No, I think we covered it. I did see that Martin messaged us one more question of, should I start off a glossary with a few dozen entries and then build it up, or wait till it looks more impressive? And I did want to answer that I'm always in favor of, go ahead and get started. So you don't need to have 200 pages to launch it. It takes time to build momentum. So if, even a few dozen, that's plenty. You could start with even a dozen of a smaller kind of glossary lexicon, but, it takes time to build momentum. Can always come back to, like, if they're shorter articles, come back and continue to update them to make those really in-depth long form guides. But especially for a new website, you need to start building authority. You need to start building awareness in the space. So definitely never wait till something's perfect. Live is always better than perfect.
100%. Yeah, think about this. If it takes you, let's say, you have a content team writing 5 posts a week and you want to have 100 posts to launch, you're waiting 20 weeks. This is 20 weeks in which content is sitting in your Google Drive collecting dust, whilst it could be index scrolls, collecting links and social shares. So I'm like all with Rebecca is definitely, once you have the first 3, 4, 5, get it up, get it going, and then build it out from there. Especially in a brand new site, when you're probably launching on a new URL, a new domain in the Google sandbox. Google is not showing you a whole lot of love in the first 2 or 3 months. Definitely, get it out there, build out the site, start getting crawled and indexed, and then work from there. All right. What are kind of like some of the learnings? I think one, there's more to SEO content than blogs. I think thinking about where can you put, a lot of SEO content at scale effectively with a clear, with a very clear SOP in terms of like, where does it go? What are the URLs? And a very good page template is a really, really strong opportunity. Structure both in your website, but also in your approach is really key. Having really good keyword mapping, really clear URLs. And then that content at scale really moves the needle, right? Like they really basically, from an SEO perspective, became from 0 to like massive in 2 years with the strategy, which is pretty short time frame in the world of SEO, I would say. And then, yeah, kind of like map your keywords neatly. Make sure the same keywords, you don't want the same keyword living in the HR lexicon, in your research center, and in your blog. That is the SEO nightmare, you know, 1 page per keyword cluster, 1 keyword cluster per page, and making sure that everything has a very specific home. And I do think having a lexicon or glossary makes that easier. Ooh, Kristen asks, are there any scenarios where shorter glossary terms, more like a dictionary, work well for SEO, or longer kind of always the best way to go? Rebecca, do you want to talk about the FAQ that you just built?
Oh, well, that one too is also longer form content. Their best performing FAQ library is longer form content. And Kristen, I do think there are, I've seen scenarios where shorter glossary terms can perform, but that is rare and further in between. It is still longer form content. You know, it doesn't necessarily mean it's 2,000 words, but search engines are still looking for that extra context of like keyword density of understanding what a page is about. And that's often difficult to do. You know, I've seen, if anything, the examples where shorter glossaries work better, sites with really, really high domain authority. So, you know, Investopedia can have a 300 word like kind of dictionary that is going to perform well, but I think it's much more difficult for your kind of more novice website or someone who's not one of those 90+ domain authority.
Yeah, I think it's a fair point. And also just one comment to add to this topic of shorter. One person showed me a glossary recently, which was 1 page, all the terms on the same page, and all the terms had a very brief description. And that is not going to work, right? Because that means that 20 keywords are all mapped to the same page with very confusing keyword optimization, and it's probably going to lead to nothing. So the point of the glossary is really, even if it's shorter content, it needs to live on its own page. It needs to target its own keyword. It needs to meet its own search intent. And so simply having a list of terms and defining them is not going to be able to get you there. It does need that breakout. And yeah, I think 2,000 word is pretty long, but also this is like for a very, very head term in a like massive industry. If you're more niche, you can probably can get away maybe sometimes with 800, 1,200, 1,500. Can you get away with 20 or 200? Probably not. That is the unfortunate like reality of SEO. I'm crossing my fingers on BERT and MUM, the 2 big algorithm updates in the last 2 years, which are improving Google's language understanding and which might increase our chances of shorter pages actually ranking again because they're meeting search intent better. But I wouldn't construct my content calendar around that bet at this point. Nice. All right. If ever you have any questions coming up, I'm at Viola at Flow SEO. Rebecca is at rebecca@flow-seo.com. And so if you want to follow up any you know, discussion on this, or if you have any questions, yeah, we would love to keep chatting about this. I actually did a keyword mapping for product and use case pages in my lunch break today because I'm so excited about this stuff. So don't shy away from reaching out. We really like setting these things up.
Well, thank you so much, Viola. It was great to be here today. And I
was
also
good.
love keyword mapping and all that. So please do reach out.
Exactly. I think we share the same passion. It's really good to have you on the webinar here today. I really appreciate it. And so, yeah, for everyone else, thank you so much for taking the time. I know you have a busy day, and it's always good to have some people here to learn SEO with. And I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.